This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. Ousted former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi has died after fainting in court. How to tackle the spread of Ebola. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni meets with the head of the World Health Organization after 2 people died last week. A triple suicide attack in northeast Nigeria has killed at least 30 people. Life gets back to normal in Sudan as officials promise those responsible for a violent crackdown will be sent to the gallows.
And we're here in Rennes, where in just over an hour's time, Nigeria will be taking on their host France in the hope of making it through to the last 16 at the Women's World Cup.
Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. We begin with some breaking news. The former Egyptian president, Mohamed Morsi, has died during a court appearance in the capital, Cairo. He fainted in the courtroom. Mr. Morsi was elected in 2012 when leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, but was deposed by the army a year later. Under the current government, he had been facing multiple legal charges. Let's get some more now on this with Rania Sabri. Rania, what more do we know about what happened?
We know that former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi was attending a court session, one of the 4 trials he's facing, and this one is about espionage. He asked to speak to the judge. The judge allowed him, and he took the floor, spoke for a few minutes before the judge adjourned the session. And right afterwards, President Morsi collapsed on the floor, and then they called in a doctor, and he checked, and he announced him dead. The exact time was 10 to 5 or Cairo local time, or that is 10 to 1500 G. And we're waiting for more statements. So far, the Ministry of Interior said that it was on high security alert after the piece of news has been announced. And also the Prosecutor General issued a statement saying that it is keeping all the CCTV camera footage from inside the court and is going to question all the people attending with Morsi in the same case and who were next to him when the collapse happened.
So what exactly was he doing in court?
Just like we said, after Morsi was removed as president in 2013, he was facing 4 different judicial courts trials, and one of them had to do with the espionage with Hamas in neighboring Gaza Strip. Actually, it has been a labyrinth of judicial procedures and court sessions. Not much attention has been given to these courts since they have been dragging on for years, since 2013, just like you said. So it's been almost 6 years, and he has been behind bars in those 6 years, seen but not often. And his family had often complained that he was not receiving proper medical care, and they could not see him as often as they could. Actually, for the first few years, I think 4 years, they only met him once, and that was after a number of requests were turned down. They were granted a brief visit, but they complained from his circumstances and the conditions he was kept in general.
All right, Rania Sabri with that update for us. Thank you. Now to Uganda, where 96 people are now being monitored following exposure to the Ebola virus. The country's president, Yoweri Museveni, has been meeting with the head of the World Health Organization after 2 people died of Ebola in the country last week. Now, Uganda's health minister says all border points are now being manned around the clock, and health checks are being carried out on people crossing the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, it's not the only country taking precautions. Nigeria's Center for Disease Control says there's a low risk of the country being affected by Ebola, but it has heightened screening measures in states where major points of entry are located: Lagos, Kano, Abuja and Rivers. Now, there was also concern in Kenya after a woman was placed in isolation over fears she had contracted Ebola. Blood samples taken from the patient turned out to be negative, and health officials have confirmed there is no Ebola in the country. Well, the BBC's Dia Jenner sent this report from Kampala.
Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus's visit to Uganda comes barely a week after the first case of Ebola was confirmed in the country. His first stop today was a meeting with President Museveni. Uganda has been on alert ever since an outbreak of Ebola was confirmed in the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. 2 people who were infected with the virus in the DRC died after crossing the border into Uganda. Today, whilst touring a facility carrying out tests on suspected cases, the World Health Organization Director General urged the international community to give more financial support to prevent the virus spreading.
It's the smartest investment is in preparedness. So that's why we're asking the international community also to invest in the neighboring countries, including Uganda, to boost preparedness that prevents the suffering and death of people.
Uganda alone has a funding shortfall of $7.8 million as it moves to control an outbreak that has killed 2 people so far. According to the World Health Organization, the country would need up to $12 million to prevent the outbreak from spreading to 21 other high-risk districts, all close to the Democratic Republic of Congo. In Uganda's western district of Kasese, where the 2 cases were confirmed, authorities are vaccinating anyone known to have come into contact with those infected. The Ministry of Health says it plans to vaccinate 96 residents, as well as more than 3,000 health workers in the area. The country currently has no confirmed cases of the Ebola virus, but the Ministry of Health here in Kampala says it will not declare Uganda Ebola-free until the outbreak in the DRC has been contained. Dia Jean, BBC News, Kampala.
Let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. One of Chad's main rebel leaders, General Mohamed Morsi, has been arrested in Paris. He is accused of committing crimes against humanity in Sudan between 2005 and 2007. Now, the founder of the Chinese technology giant Huawei says his company will slash production by $30 billion over the next 2 years as it struggles with US-imposed sanctions. New laws have banned American companies and companies using US-made technology from doing business with Huawei. An internet blackout affecting many parts of Ethiopia is now in its 7th day. The service resumed in the capital Addis Ababa, but appears to be down in much of the country. At least 30 people have been killed in a triple suicide attack in Borno, northeast Nigeria. The state emergency services say at least another 40 people were injured in the attack, which took place on Sunday evening. The BBC's Mayeni Jones joins us now with the latest. Mayeni, what more do we know about this attack?
Well, Sophie, it seems that as people were watching a football game yesterday evening, a man tried to enter this hall, a public hall where they screen films and football games in Kondunga, a town southeast of Maiduguri, about an hour's drive southeast of Maiduguri. As he tried to enter, he was stopped. Some eyewitnesses say he was stopped by the owner of the place and detonated his suicide vest. Shortly after, 2 female suicide bombers who were sat nearby detonated their vests, killing the people around them.
Mayeni, it appears there's an increase now in attacks. What is happening and what's been the government reaction to all this?
Well, in the northeast, things have been sporadic. Attacks by Boko Haram are not as common as they used to be, although they're still targeting soft targets like this viewing hall and mosques and marketplaces. They've also been targeting some military positions. What is also keeping the government very busy is insecurity in other parts of the country, namely in the northwest, in the state of Zamfara, where just on Friday, 34 people were killed by armed men. So the military and the government really have their hands very full at the moment dealing with all these various security threats.
So then what advice are they giving people, especially when it comes to gatherings like this one?
Interestingly, there's been no advice yet on the part of the government. The governor, the newly elected governor of Borno State, did visit some of the injured today, and we understand that he's promised to pay for some of their treatment, but there hasn't yet been any advisory on the part of the government. And as you say, it's quite important to issue that, as it's a football season. Many people will be coming into these public places to try and view some games.
All right, and Mayeni Jones for us there in Lagos. Thank you. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, find out the unusual way these teens are getting from Cape Town to Cairo. I'm Sophie Ikenye, and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program: the former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi has died after fainting in court. He was in power for just over a year before being ousted by the army. But let's get more on that story, and I'm joined by BBC's Magdi Abdelhadi, our Arab Affairs analyst. Thank you for taking time to talk to us. I'm just wondering what impact Mr. Morsi's death.
Just briefly, I'm a former BBC Arab Affairs analyst, not anymore, freelance now. I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood as an organization is almost finished in Egypt in itself. Is crushed as never before. His death is certainly tragic for his family. Will deal a final blow to the remote possibility that the Muslim Brotherhood were sort of waving him as a possible legitimate president in waiting. That idea is dead now. Having said that, of course, they will use it, particularly the issue of him dying while in jail will once again focus the light on the conditions of prisoners in Egypt, which has been highlighted by many human rights reports. Government of Egypt, of course, deny that this is such a case, that being given good treatment in jail, which is disputed. Politically, I don't think it will change much in the balance of power. As I said, the Muslim Brotherhood is virtually, as an organization, crushed nearly totally in Egypt. They might still have some people who sympathize and with the ideas of political Islam. But political Islam in itself as an idea has come under increasing attack across the Muslim world and not just in Egypt.
But he did have a turbulent 1 year in office.
He was, he was a victim of the moment because he was not a presidential material. The Muslim Brotherhood put him as really a reserve candidate in case their favorite candidate, Khairat Shater, who was a deputy leader and he's also in jail, he couldn't run for legal technical reasons. They put Morsi forward. And then from that moment onwards, it was just one blunder after the other. As I said, he came under, of course, he basically took orders from the Muslim Brotherhood, what he should and how he should run the presidency. Also the fact, the course of the Muslim Brotherhood during the very two dramatic years from 2011, when Mubarak was removed after the uprising, until the moment the Muslim Brotherhood themselves were removed, there were very turbulent years. The Muslim Brotherhood took the side of the military against the secular political movement that was very rife at the moment. And that alienated a huge sector of the political class in Egypt, which eventually brought all the enemies of the Muslim Brotherhood together. Former regime, Mubarak supporters, with the young liberals left, and they sort of united to stage a mass protest movement. And the army moved and removed him, stepped in and removed him.
Magdi Abdelhadi, we of course will be waiting to see what reaction we'll get from Egypt over this latest development. Thank you for taking time to talk to us on the program. Thank you. Now, in Sudan, life is beginning to return to normal. A top Sudanese general has promised that those responsible for this month's violent crackdown on protesters will be sent to the gallows. Tomi Oladipo has the latest from Khartoum.
Around the city of Khartoum, you come across bricks like these, piles of them, the remnants of the weeks and weeks of protests that engulf this city. And now that's all subsided and activity is back again in the city. But the authorities have shut down the internet with the aim of keeping the protesters from mobilizing again. But that has also affected business as a whole. Over the weekend, the deputy head of the ruling military council promised that all the people who were found to be at fault for violently dispersing protesters 2 weeks ago will face justice. But the protest groups say this is not possible because it is the military who they accuse of being the ones behind the violence. Meanwhile, over the weekend, the former president Omar al-Bashir was seen for the first time in public since April when he was deposed and arrested. He faces multiple corruption charges, but there's a sense here that it'll be weeks before that trial kicks off.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's time now for some sport. Egan.
Thanks, Sophie. And we start with the latest action from the Women's World Cup in France. And South Africa, well, they are heading out of the competition. They've just lost 4-0 against Germany. So now all eyes turn to the Nigerian team. They play France in just over an hour. Mimi Fawaz is in Rennes and joins us now. Here we are. It must be an awfully exciting atmosphere for you.
Hi, Egon. Yes, indeed, Egon. It's an exciting atmosphere here. There's a barbecue going over there. There's a sea of blue fans. That's for France. We've only spotted 3 Nigerian football fans so far. We do hope that they'll be coming very soon because it's just an hour before kickoff. But for Nigeria, they're coming into this match on a positive note, having just won their match against South Korea. We saw them tighten their defense in that match and go forward in attack in the second half. They will need to do a lot more of that when they face a French side that's very strong going forward and also in defense. Now, ahead of the game, I caught up with the Niger coach, Thomas Dennerby, and what he makes of their chances of getting through to the last 16.
We can beat any team, definitely, but I don't think that we can outplay them. I think we have to look at our team and see what is our best strengths. Yes, if we can have a compact defense, hard work and waiting for the right opportunities, because with the speed we have up front, if defenders have one small second of distraction or whatever, losing focus, and they let our forwards go, they are in trouble. I'm confident with that we are going to give them a big game. Of course, we will play a team that are probably one level higher than the other two we met so far. Definitely, no doubt about that. But you still have to believe, and we have a chance already on 3 points. But of course, we have to wait and see what's happening in the other groups. But if we take 1 point against France, I think we have a really good chance. Don't you?
Oh, don't I? That's the question he put to me. Of course, Nigeria have 3 options: a win or draw, and if they lose, they've got to make sure it's not a big margin of loss, because the 4 best third-place teams can make it through to the next round. But for now, it's goodbye from me and to Peter, who's got another big tournament coming up in Cairo.
Absolutely, Mimi. Welcome to Cairo, where this Friday, the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations will be kicking off. Now, this is a different tournament from the ones we're used to. For the first time in almost 4 decades, it's moving from the months of January and February to June and July. That's so that it doesn't coincide with the European League. And it's also been expanded from 16 teams to 24 teams. Egypt, mind you, have only had 6 months to prepare for this tournament. That's because Cameroon were the original hosts, and the Confederation of African Football did not feel that they had prepared hard enough to host the competition. They lost those hosting rights, and Egypt won them in January. Let's talk to my colleague, Mohamed. He's a presenter and producer with BBC Sports here in Cairo. 6 months to prepare for this tournament. Just how ready is Egypt?
I think everything is almost ready in terms of Egypt hosting the Africa Cup of Nations. Infrastructure was in place long ago. Actually, that was one of the main reasons Egypt was given the right to host the tournament when it was taken from Cameroon. The focus in the last 6 months was on the stadiums, and we have seen great attention from Egyptian officials. Yesterday, we've seen President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi visiting the Cairo International Stadiums to check on the final preparations to host the opening game. We have seen today that the Ministry of Interior released a statement to confirm that they are finalized the plan to secure a very safe Cup of Nations for all the tournaments. And actually, some of the teams are already here. We've seen Nigeria playing Senegal yesterday in the Ismailia. Guinea and Tanzania played Egypt in the last couple of days in a friendly game. So, yeah, we can see that Egypt is quite ready for that. And
of course, Egypt's not unused to having large numbers of guests in the country because it's a huge tourist attraction itself. A lot has been said, though, about the fact that since 2012, when they had football problems with fans in Port Said, fans have not really been allowed into football stadia, even to watch the local league here in Egypt. How do you think that's going to affect fan attendance during this competition?
It's definitely quite challenging for a country that has played the domestic league for about 7 years behind closed doors to host about 52 matches in the duration of 30 days with attendance of fans. But actually, Egypt has prepared for that. They introduced a new ticketing system, a new fan ID system, quite similar to that one that was in Russia in the World Cup. That's going to facilitate, according to the Egyptian officials, the way of fans to enter the stadiums. It's going to be controllable for them, and they're going to be knowing everyone who's going to be in the stands. That's going to facilitate. They say that Egypt tickets in the first round are already sold out. So some of them are already gone, and they're quite excited with the fact that there are some bookings on other games like Algeria, Senegal, Morocco, Ivory Coast. Some of these tickets are almost sold out as well. So fans are quite excited to be reintroduced to the stadiums. For example, Cairo International Stadium, the venue of the opening game, Egypt-Zimbabwe, on Friday. This game is going to be the first game with the attendance of fans in 5 years. The last time Cairo International Stadium had that full house attendance was in the CAF Cup final in 2014 when Al Ahly beat Sewispor of the Ivory Coast. So every time we had the chance here in Egypt to see a game with the attendance of fans since Port Said, it was full house and there weren't much problems.
And you know, you're talking about the fans, the Egyptian fans. How easy have the Egyptian authorities made it for fans from other parts of the continent to attend these games?
I think the fan ID thing is going to be facilitating for fans to get their own visas to enter Egypt freely, and the fact that they can buy tickets online is going to facilitate their way to the stands, because last time Egypt hosted the tournament there weren't any ticketing system, there weren't online system. You had to come to Egypt first, then buy a ticket to attend the game. Now you have your tickets prior to coming to Egypt, and I think with the distribution of the teams around the city of Cairo and even in Suez, Ismailia and Port Said, fans will have the chance this time to follow the teams easily and to attend the games regularly.
Brilliant. My very good friend and my colleague, Mohammed. I mean, we're friends now. We'll probably become rivals sometime during this tournament, because everybody here in Egypt has been asking me, so who do you think is going to win this tournament? Well, I guess everybody knows what my answer is and what Mohammed's answer is. But I tell you what, I've been told that for that opening match on Friday between Egypt and Zimbabwe, the fans are going to be in the stadium at least 8 hours before kickoff. That's how much they're waiting to watch this competition. Back to you, Egon.
Exciting times, Peter. Well, that's it for the sport. You can keep up with all the action from AFCON and the Women's World Cup on the BBC Sports website. Sophie.
Thank you, Egon. Thank you. Well, just before we go, take a look at this. An aircraft built by South African teenagers is being flown from Cape Town to Cairo and has successfully made its first stop in Namibia. Now, the teenagers built the aircraft in 3 weeks from a manufacturing kit. 17-year-old pilot Megan Rana, who came up with the idea, hopes to show that anything is possible if you set your mind to it. Well, don't forget you can get in touch with me and the rest of the team on Twitter. I'm @Sikenya. That's Focus on Africa for now. Thank you for your company. Thank you.